All right, Krystal, what's on your radar?
Well, the Sunday shows, they're a little extra embarrassing this week, as many of the Republicans who are happy to indulge Trump for years in service of achieving power, tax cuts, and judicial nominees, they desperately tried to rewrite history and put themselves on the righteous side.
And then fixed it, reversed course, and did the right thing. That was the president that we saw time and again. You saw him through the media. You saw him in the light that you wanted to see him. We saw the real President Trump, who had that ability to pivot when he knew something had gone off the rails. That didn't happen on Wednesday. It hasn't happened much since the election. And that's what I think the difference is, and that's why I got that piece so wrong 6 weeks ago.
So look, I've actually got a somewhat nuanced view on this. If people like Mitch and Christie and Mulvaney and Toomey and more are ready to be honest about just how damaging Trump has been to the country and the way he's lied to and used the Republican Party base, that's a good thing. They should be encouraged. They should be given credit for doing so. That doesn't make their own austerity and pro-corporate mindsets any less abhorrent, and I don't think it's too much to ask for a little bit of self-reflection here as well. Not only in how they enabled Trump specifically, but let's never lose sight of the fact that Trump may have gathered the kindling, and he certainly lit the match. But the materials for that tinderbox, they definitely predated Trump. And these guys, among many, many others, were complicit. In fact, if you're looking at what our country has become, where millions are easily duped into complete delusions and some small subset is so convinced that they are willing to actually risk their lives on a complete fantasy, if you're looking at that and feeling really superior, feeling aghast and completely removed from it, I'd be really suspicious of that feeling. I think it is critically important to place vehement blame on the people who were most culpable. Those who broke laws should obviously be prosecuted, and we got plenty of existing laws, by the way, to cover it without adding new levels to the police state. And especially, we should use whatever tools are at our disposal to do that rarest of things and actually create some consequences for the elites who played with fire for fun and profit. That's why I support impeaching Trump or passing a 14th Amendment legislative ban on him ever seeking office again. I also support censure for the congressional ringleaders of this madness. I've heard many people exclaim after watching this mob rampage through the Capitol that this isn't who we are and that this isn't America. But unfortunately, this is America. It's the America that we collectively have built and have fed. There's hardly a person among us who hasn't made some contribution to this America that we see before us, whether it was large or small. So let me start here with myself. I've taken a lot of heat for a rather snarky and self-satisfied radar I delivered back in November. Let's take a listen. Well, folks, not sure what happened here this past week, but I am sorely disappointed. I mean, I have been promised a fascist authoritarian coup directed by Vladimir Putin himself for 4 years now, and I'm getting a little impatient waiting to see how it all goes down. In fact, I was told this election wouldn't even happen because Trump would cancel it or at least postpone it indefinitely. I was told that an elaborate plot was being hatched with scary words like disinformation and misinformation and deep fakes to rob poor innocent Joe Biden of his rightful victory. I was informed in no uncertain terms that Attorney General Bill Barr had masterminded a devious plot to confiscate ballot boxes, or that Trump would force the FDA to inject all Democrats with toxic hydroxychloroquine or something. So I actually went back and I reviewed that entire radar to think about what I would do differently if I had to deliver it again. Now, if you look at the whole thing, I do, in fact, decry the damage Trump has done to the country, and I warn what a dangerous situation it is that millions of Americans are complete nihilists with zero trust in anyone outside of Donald Trump. If I did it again, I probably would revise it to foreground that danger and to treat it a little more seriously. But the truth is, we did take that threat extremely seriously for months building up to Election Day. We talked about it relentlessly in the build-up to November. How the country's on edge, at each other's throats, desperate, lonely, conspiratorial, and that Trump was a bad actor who would never, ever do anything but add to the chaos and light the fuse. I mean, this guy lost his mind after Mitt Romney lost, unleashing a classic Trumpian tweet storm, including allegations that the vote was rigged and that, quote, we should have a revolution in this country. Now, he's too lazy to actually try to go full dictator and stay in office. But will he recklessly incite his most highly agitated and, by the way, highly armed supporters, the Kyle Rittenhouse portion of the party? There's just no doubt about it. But I have to tell you, I keep looking for the evidence to deflate my catastrophizing, and the more that I dig in, the more troubled I become. A presidential election is a pressure test of democracy. How confident are you feeling that our system can really take it? Now, in fairness, I think I did relax some when election night came and went and weeks passed without any violence. I should have been more alarmed about the continued possibility for that chaos. And by the way, I am now alarmed about the continued possibility of chaos. I don't see any reason to believe that things are just going to be all good now. But to be honest with you, I don't have any real regrets about our coverage. In fact, I'd say overall, I feel really proud of our coverage. We were correct about the nature of the threat. Not that Trump would be able to organize some actual coup with any remote chance of success. The man's lazy and he's a coward. But the danger was always in what he would whip his supporters into a frenzy to do. And we took that threat extremely seriously. Now, the way that most media signals they're taking a threat seriously is by hyperbole and moral preening. Our way of taking the threat seriously was to actually take it seriously. We weren't just looking to virtue signal and show contempt for the people who bought in to stop this deal, many of whom have very good reasons to distrust the media and every institution of government. We wanted to be in a position to actually be listened to when we explained why there was nothing to the idea that the election was rigged. So our way of taking the threat seriously was to dismiss the more ridiculous conspiracies that come from resistance liberals and to call out the politicians and media figures who indulged all of this stop the steal nonsense. We took the threat seriously by painstakingly covering on our show every lawsuit filed by the Trump campaign and their allies and the evidence presented rather than just doing a wave of the hand at all the claims being made. Unusually, the rising audience is actually quite ideologically diverse. That's something I'm really proud of. So when we think about how to do coverage, we think carefully about how to convey information in a way that it will actually be received and considered. Coding it in condescension and hyperbole, it's not really helpful. And I dare say that if other media outlets hadn't spent the past 4 years crying wolf and indulging insanities like the P-tape and what if Trump was a Russian agent since 1987, maybe they would have had a little more credibility for this critical moment. But I do have regrets. I have big regrets about my own personal contribution to this tribal powder keg that we're living in. I regret the time I went on CNN in 2016 after Hillary made her deplorable comment and said smugly, "Sometimes the truth hurts." I regret the excuses I made for Obama when I was at MSNBC, especially on national security, trusting blindly that Democrats were the good guys, and so their drone strikes must be more just than the Republicans' drone strikes. I regret the amount I bought into the Russiagate nonsense in the early days, giving too much credence to the conspiracies and the spooks who were driving the whole narrative. Overall, I regret every time I too easily played the role of partisan cheerleader rather than patriot. Every time I looked at large swaths of the country with contempt rather than an interest in understanding. I know I've played my part at times in creating the mess we're in now. And the biggest reason why I feel so anxious about the future for this country isn't because of whatever Trump may do next, though that is certainly cause for concern, but because 99% of elites in this country, they have no desire, no ability to examine their own culpability, and zero intention to change. All those who fueled mindless culture wars for ratings, who lied in service of their own power, who destroyed the middle class, crushed the working class, who let corporations gut this country for profit. In fact, they feel more self-satisfied, more justified than ever before. Now, this is not to erase the heinous acts of those who directly fomented last week's riots, but only to say, if you want the country to go down a different path, you better figure out what's your part in forging one. And Sagar, look, Trump, obviously the most proximate cause here, but in some ways it's the least interesting part.
Yes.
Because if it's a healthy country, if we're in a good place, people would laugh off Donald. He never would have gotten elected through the primary, never would have gotten elected, and would never have been in the position to stoke the chaos we saw last week.
No, you're exactly right. And look, this is the other part, too, where the people who are going after you and are saying, oh, you downplayed all this. Here's the thing. They're never actually, they always set themselves up in a position where they're not wrong. So like Michael Moore comes on the show and says that Bill Barr is going to go and steal ballot boxes in Pennsylvania, and then Trump spouts a bunch of nonsense on Twitter and some people storm the Capitol. And people are like, see, Michael Moore was right. Was he, though? Because he was alleging a grand national conspiracy of the Department of Justice and the U.S. government when it was Trump whipping up his supporters, a select group of his supporters, who go and storm the U.S. Capitol. Okay, I mean, he wasn't correct. And so what they do is they set the bar all the way over here. Trump, because he's Trump, plays into it, let's say 25%. And they go, see, we were right. And I'm like, there's still a gulf of 75%. Right. What are you talking about? Well, that was a lie.
And here's the thing. When you focus on threats that are completely absurd, right? Like that was absurd. There was no basis for it. The idea that the military, that was really floated by a lot of very serious people, that the military was going to get involved, was going to be on his side, and all of those things, that the Postal Service was going to rig the election. And again, they give you enough to work with, and that is certainly the case. But a lot of these things were fantasies, and they're absurd. So when you're fixated on these things that are way too out there, way too conspiratorial, you miss the nature of the real threat. Now, again, look, I'm not saying that I was perfect or that we were perfect or any of that. But I really went back and looked over our coverage, and this was exactly the threat that we took seriously from the beginning, because it didn't take a genius to see the country's a powder keg. And if you take Trump out of it, if you take the specific causes out of it, and you just look at the top line numbers, the depression, the anxiety, the suicide, all of these things, again, this doesn't deny anyone of their agency and their culpability, but you look at those metrics and you go, this is a disastrous potential situation in waiting, and we know what Trump does. We know the way he's out. This guy's too chicken shit to go out there and storm the barricades himself. But is he happy to whip up other people into taking outrageous actions? Of course he is,
and
100%.
Your last point is the most important one. Trump is too convenient by half for all of their excuses. Okay? So, like I said, part of the problems that we've always had is that we don't have honorable people who are interlocutors, who can defend the republic and say this is part of the structural problems that we have in our country. For example, after the riots, everyone started passing around a statement by George W. Bush. And I said, screw you. I don't want to hear what George W. Bush has to say about protecting democracy. To go take a look at Baghdad in 2003 and see the chaos that he wrought upon millions of Iraqis, and then take a look at the Syrian civil war, and I can go on. And same in Kabul, and Condoleezza Rice comes out and says the same thing. I'm like, I don't want to hear it from you. You don't think you played a role in creating in this powder keg that we have here as a country? Or you see these large corporations who are all like, taking Trump off of, their payment processors and all that. What is this all really about? They don't give a rat's ass about Trump or any of these things that happen. They want cachet with the Biden administration and with the Democrats because they don't want to be regulated whenever they have combined unity of government. That is their actual purpose here. That's it. All of them need to be honest. And you might say, and you see all the richest people in the world and others coming down and trying to turn this into a thing about Trump selectively. Of course, he is responsible for so much of what happened there. But how did we create this system in which so many people hate the media so much they won't even listen to them whenever they're trying to inform them on the election, on any of the, because first of all, as we said here, many of the people on CNN and others were not reading the lawsuits. They were not telling, they were just like, it's baseless or whatever. It was baseless, but you have to explain why.
Well, and at that point it was too late anyway. They had no credibility. Yeah, it was too far gone.
Right? So why do you and I want to go and sit and hear what Malcolm Nance or any of these other Russiagators have to say about whether something is baseless? Your existence is baseless in so many different ways. Your coverage, your network, all of that. And they will never examine their own role in pushing us to there. And we're not both siding this. Trump is responsible.
Yes.
He bears responsibility for what he whipped people up to do. But if you want to ignore the structural inequities and all of the many years that led to what happened, then you're just not actually interested in solving the problem.
If you think getting rid of Trump is any sort of answer, you are a fool.
Yes.
And that's the bottom line.
Yeah, I agree with that.
All right, Sagar, looking forward to your radar. That's next.